Orchestrated original betrayal narrative with fresh characters and strategic emotional beats. Orchestrated original betrayal narrative with fresh characters and strategic emotional beats. I spent 26 years building a heating and cooling company out of one rusted-out van and a back that's never been right since. And the whole time I told myself the business was the gamble and my marriage was the sure thing. That was the part I had backward. On a gray Tuesday in March, I found my wife's second phone tucked behind the spare blankets in the linen closet, and I learned she'd been living a separate life since the summer before. When I finally put it into words at the foot of our bed, she looked at me like I was the one who'd lost his mind and told me I was turning a nothing into a circus. So after she fell asleep that night, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and started writing down account numbers. By sunrise, I had the beginnings of a plan. And inside a year, the woman who thought she had me cornered lost the house, the affair, and any say over the child we both sworn to look after. And I got my whole life back. My name's Wesley Pruitt. I'm 52, and I run Pruitt Comfort Systems just outside Chattanooga. We do commercial HVAC and refrigeration, restaurant walk-ins, church sanctuaries, the cold rooms at two of the bigger grocery chains in the valley. Started it in my late 20s with nothing but a Yellow Pages ad and a willingness to crawl into attics in August. Now we've got 11 trucks and a name people in 3 counties trust when their cooler dies on a Friday night. Marlene and I have been married 23 years. We met when she was waiting tables and I was a sunburned kid with grease under my nails who couldn't afford the steak. She was sharp with numbers, sharper with people. And after the second kid came, she took over the books for the company. That was the smartest thing we ever did, or so I believed for the better part of 2 decades. She handled payroll, vendor accounts, the lines of credit, all of it. I'd come in off a job and she'd already have the invoices reconciled and a coffee waiting. We were a team. People used to say it to our faces like a compliment, and I'd nod like a fool who'd earned it. We had 3 kids in the house. Hazel's 20 now, second year of nursing school up in Knoxville. Comes home every couple weekends to do her laundry and boss her brother around. Corey's 17, a senior, more interested in his synthesizers and the soldering iron than anything I ever understood, but a good kid with a soft heart. And then there's Nora. Nora's 12. She's my sister's girl. My sister passed 4 years back. Pills and a long road that started with a real injury and ended somewhere none of us could follow. And Nora came to live with us when there wasn't anybody else fit to take her. We never adopted on paper. We just took her in, signed the guardianship, and that was that. She came to us flinching at raised voices and hoarding granola bars in her sock drawer. And somewhere along the line, she stopped flinching and started leaving her shoes in the middle of the hall like she owned the place. She owned the place, far as I was concerned. Her and that mutt of hers, Banjo, who follows her room to room like she's the last warm thing on earth. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Same as everybody notices the phone, I guess. Marlene had always been loose about it. Left it face up on the counter, let it buzz through dinner, hollered at the kids to bring it to her from the other room. Then around July, it started living in her back pocket. She'd take it to the bathroom. She'd carry it out to the porch to get a better signal, which is a funny thing to need in a house that's had the same dead spot by the recliner for a decade. Then came the late evenings. She told me the company's payroll software was migrating to a new system, and she had to stay at the office after hours to babysit the upload. Made sense to me at the time. I don't touch the bookkeeping. I wouldn't know a migration from a hole in the ground. But one Thursday I had to swing back by the shop for a torque wrench I'd left in my locker near 8 o'clock, and the office was dark. Her parking spot empty. I figured I'd just missed her. I didn't think anything of it until it happened again. And then a third time, and I started keeping a quiet little tally in my head the way you do when something itches and you can't reach it. The closeness went too. Marlene used to wait up. She'd be on the couch with a true crime show, paused, feet under her, and she'd want to hear about my day even when my day was just 3 condenser units and a fight with a part supplier. By the fall, she was asleep before I got home. Turned toward the window, and our talk had shrunk down to logistics. Corey needs a ride. Hazel's car insurance is due. Did you sign the field trip thing for Nora? We sounded like 2 people running a small business together, which I suppose we were. Except the business was supposed to be a marriage, and somewhere it had quietly become just the books. The thing that finally got its hooks in me was small. A grocery run. She said she was going to the Publix on Gun Barrel, which is 20 minutes there and back, and she was gone 2.5 hours and came home with 1 bag, half and half, and a box of the granola bars Nora likes. No receipt in the bag. When I asked, easy, just making conversation. She said she'd run into an old friend and lost track of time, and she said it too fast. with her eyes already moving to something else, and the hair on my arm stood up like the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. I want to be honest about something, because the men in stories like this always come off looking either like saints or like the last fool in the world to figure it out. I'm neither. I knew. Some animal part of me knew by Halloween. I just didn't want to be the man who searched his wife's phone, so I told myself I was decent for not doing it, and decency kept me blind a couple months longer than it should have. What broke it open wasn't even snooping. It was the bank. I do all my banking at the same branch I've used since I had 3 trucks. And there's a teller there named Ramona who's been ringing up my deposits long enough to ask after my kids by name. I went in that first week of March to move some money for a chiller we were buying, and Ramona pulled up the business accounts and got a funny look, the kind where somebody's deciding whether to say a thing. Then she said it. She said, "Real careful, Mr. Diff Pruitt. I just want to make sure. These transfers to the personal savings, the ones twice a month, you and Marlene are both signed off on those, right? Because they've been adding up, and one of our flags went off last week." I said, "What transfers?" And the look on her face told me everything before the screen did. 8 months. A standing transfer from the company operating account into a personal savings line I didn't know existed, on a card I'd never seen, twice a month, anywhere from $1,200 to $3,500 a clip. Ramona printed me a statement, because she's good people and because I asked her to, and I sat in my truck in that parking lot and read it 3 times, with the engine running and my heart going like a bad compressor about to seize. That night I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't have the whole shape of it, and 26 years of running a business teaches you that you don't make a move on a hunch when you can make it on a fact. I waited until she was asleep, and I went to the linen closet because that's the one spot in the house she'd told the kids was off limits. Mom stuff, leave it. And behind the good blankets there it was. A second phone. Cheap one. Not even locked because she was that sure of herself. I'm not going to walk through every message. I read enough. They went back to June. A man named Trevor, a regional sales rep for Tri-State Mechanical, one of our own suppliers, a guy I'd shaken hands with at a trade show and bought a beer for. Married, I happened to know, with a little girl about Nora's age. The early ones were stupid and sweet, the kind of thing that makes you embarrassed for grown adults. The later ones weren't stupid. They were plans. Hotel by the airport Tuesdays and Thursdays, which were the exact nights she was babysitting the migration. And then a few that turned my stomach for a different reason. Her, to him, got another 2,200 moved. The account's looking healthy. This'll be a real cushion for us. Him. To her, you're a genius. Can't believe how easy he makes it. He. Me. Easy. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet with that phone in my hand for the better part of an hour. I didn't cry. That came later, in the truck, on a job site, out of nowhere the way it does. Right then, I just felt the floor of my life drop out about 2 feet, and then hold. And in that held breath quiet, the old contractor in me started taking measurements. Here's the part I want any man watching this to hear, because it's the part I'd have wanted somebody to tell me. The morning after I found that phone, I did not confront her. I went to work like normal. I kissed Nora on the head and told Corey to find his good shoes. And the second Marlene left for the office, I drove to the branch, and I sat down with the manager. By noon, I'd opened a new operating account she had no signature on, redirected the auto pay for our vendors and payroll to it, and put a dual authorization hold on the old account so nothing could move out of it without both of us physically present. I called our CPA, a no-nonsense woman named Doreen, and told her I needed a full forensic look at 8 months of books and I needed it quiet. I called a lawyer my brother knew, Deborah Fontaine, who handles family law and doesn't waste your time, and I had a retainer to her by end of day. I locked it all down before I ever let on that I knew anything. I'd watched a buddy go through a divorce 10 years back and watched his wife empty the accounts in the 48 hours between the fight and the filing, and I swore that was one mistake I wasn't going to make. You don't get to feel betrayed and also feel financially careless, and call yourself the smart one. I wanted to be able to call myself the smart one. Doreen called me 4 days later, and her voice had that flat, careful tone people use when the number's going to hurt. Across 8 months, somewhere north of $61,000 had moved out of the business and into that hidden savings account, then out again. Gas, hotels, a watch from a jeweler downtown that I will never in my life understand, and a chunk that had simply been wired to a personal account belonging to one Trevor Lund. But the part that made me sit down was the loan. She'd opened a line of credit against the company's equipment. our trucks, our diagnostic gear, and she'd done it with my signature. Doreen sent me the scan. It was my name and it was not my hand. 41,000 against the things my men drive to work every morning. Signed by somebody who is not me. That was the moment it stopped being about my pride and started being about something colder and clearer. A man can survive his wife loving somebody else. I genuinely believe that. People fall out of things. Hearts are weather, not stone. But she'd reached past me and into the kids. That savings account she'd been bleeding the company into. It was funded, in part, by money I'd been setting aside every quarter into what we called the kids' account. Hazel's tuition, Corey's first car, and a little we'd started squirreling away for Nora, who'd come to us with nothing and deserved to leave us with a future. Marlene had drained nearly 19,000 out of that, and on the spreadsheet it sat there in Doreen's tidy red font. And I thought about Nora hoarding granola bars in her sock drawer, and any softness I had left went out of me like heat off a roof at midnight. I confronted her on a Sunday after the kids were down. I'd rehearsed staying calm, and I mostly managed it. I told her I knew about Trevor, about the hotel, about the money, about the loan with my name forged on it. I laid the bank statement on the counter between us like a man laying down a winning hand he takes no joy in. She didn't fall apart the way you'd think. That's the thing nobody tells you. She got organized. She told me I'd been reading things wrong, that Trevor was a work contact and the money was a tax strategy. She'd been meaning to explain that I was a person who panicked and built monsters out of shadows. When I read one of the messages out loud, the genius one, the easy one, she changed tack so fast it gave me whiplash. Suddenly it was my fault. I worked too much. I'd stopped seeing her. A woman gets lonely. Did I know how it felt to be invisible in your own house? I said, how long? She said, it's not what you've decided it is in your head. I said, how long, Marlene? And she crossed her arms and told me I was blowing a hard season into a catastrophe to avoid looking at my own part in it, that nothing here was as ugly as I was determined to make it, and that if I'd just calm down, we could keep this between us and not torch the family over a mistake. Even then, even with my forged name sitting on the granite between us, she was managing me. Same way she managed the vendors, same way she managed the kids' schedules. I watched her do it, and I felt the last of something I'd been carrying for 23 years just set itself down and walk off. I didn't yell. I went to bed in a guest room, and I lay there in the dark listening to her actually fall asleep. Fall asleep, like a person with a clear conscience. And around 4 in the morning I got up, and I packed 2 bags by the light of my phone. Clothes, the folder with the bank statements and Doreen's report, the kids' birth certificates and Nora's guardianship papers, which I'd already photographed but wanted in my own hands. I left a note on the counter that said I was at Dale's, and the kids could reach me anytime, day or night, on my cell. I stood in the hall a second outside Nora's door, and heard Banjo thump his tail against the floor. And then I left. And I didn't let myself look at the house in the rear view because I knew if I did, I'd talk myself into staying. My brother Dale's got a place out toward the river with a guest room that smells like motor oil and the cigarettes he swears he quit. He didn't say much when I showed up at 5 in the morning. He made coffee. He said our daddy always told us a man's first job is to know when he's done being a doormat, and then he let me sit there and not talk, which is the kindest thing anybody did for me that whole spring. The phone started up around 7. First, the denials. You're being dramatic. Come home. The kids are scared. Then, when those didn't land, the heat. You're abandoning your family. You'll regret this. You've always cared more about that business than us. By afternoon, it had curdled into bargaining. I'll end it with Trevor. We'll do counseling. Please don't blow up everything we built. I didn't answer any of it. Deborah had told me, in that level lawyer voice, to keep every message and respond to none. And for once, I had the discipline to do what I was told. Hazel called me that night from Knoxville, and that was the call that nearly broke me. My girl, crying, asking what was happening. Was it true? Was it about money or about somebody else? And could I just tell her the truth because Mom was telling her 3 different things? I told her the truth, mostly. I told her that her mom and I had problems that were ours, not the kids. That I loved every one of them more than my own life. And that I was going to make sure they were all right, no matter what. Hazel went quiet a long time, and then she said, Dad, I'm not stupid. I knew something was wrong at Christmas, and I realized then that the kids always know. They just wait to see if the grown-ups have the decency to say it out loud. Corey, my quiet one, called the next morning, and he was furious in a way I'd never heard from him. Said he'd heard Mom on the phone in the garage saying my name like a problem to be handled, telling somebody, Trevor, had to be, that I'd settled down once a lawyer told me what divorce actually costs, that she could ride it out. Corey said, shaking. She's playing you like the whole thing's a negotiation, Dad. And I told him he didn't have to carry that no kid should be a spy in his own house. And he said, I'm not spying. I'm just done pretending I don't hear it. It was Nora, though. A week in, Marlene let me take Nora and Corey to Nora's Saturday soccer game. Agreed to it easy, which I understood later was Deborah's prediction coming true. Marlene building a paper trail of looking cooperative. I picked Nora up and she climbed in the truck and didn't say anything for a few miles. Just held Banjo's old chewed-up tennis ball in her lap. And then she said, real small, Are you going away forever? And I had to pull over. I told her no. I told her that whatever happened between me and her Aunt Marlene, she and I were not up for negotiation. That I was her family and that didn't have an expiration date and never would. She looked at me with those careful eyes she came to us with. The eyes of a kid who'd already learned that grown-ups leave. And she said, promise on Banjo. So I promised on Banjo. It is, to this day, the most serious oath I have ever sworn. The next part I'll keep short, because the audience for a story like mine usually wants to know one thing above all. Did the people who did this actually pay, or did everybody walk off whistling? So here's how it landed. Deborah hired a man named Hector Vega, a private investigator who'd done 20 years of this and didn't blink at any of it. Hector didn't have to work hard, honestly. Marlene had been sloppy in the way overconfident people are sloppy. The hotel kept records. The jeweler kept records. Trevor's company kept expense logs that put him in town on the exact Tuesdays. And the second phone she'd never even bothered to wipe, because she never once believed I'd be the kind of man who looked. But here's the piece I made sure of, the piece I'd promised myself, because I'd read enough of these stories to know how they usually end, with the woman ruined and the other man strolling off untouched to do it again to somebody else. I would not have that. Trevor Lund had signed off, in writing, in those messages, on a scheme to drain a business he sold parts to. He'd accepted a wire from a company account that wasn't his. Deborah looped in a civil attorney, and we put Trevor on notice as a party to the financial fraud. Not just the sad sack boyfriend, but a named adult who'd knowingly taken stolen money. During's forensic file went to the bank's fraud unit over the forged loan, because forging a man's signature on a $41,000 instrument isn't a marriage problem. It's a crime. And I was not going to be polite about it for the sake of appearances. Trevor's wife found out. I didn't tell her. I want to be clear about that. I'm not built to twist a knife into a woman who never did a thing to me. But the civil filing was a public record, and word travels in a valley this size. And within a month, Trevor Lund was unemployed, separated, and looking at having to repay money he'd already spent. He stopped answering Marlene about the time the consequences showed up, which tells you everything you need to know about what they had. The cushion they built for us turned out to be load-bearing for exactly one of them. We had our day in court 6 months after I walked out. Judge Alma Reyes, a woman who'd clearly seen every kind of liar the human race produces and had run clean out of patience for any of them. Deborah laid it out plain. The embezzlement, the hotel records, the jeweler, the wire to Trevor. The $19,000 pulled from accounts earmarked for the children. Then she put up the forged loan, side by side, my real signature next to the fake, and even Marlene's attorney went still. Marlene's side tried the only card they had, which was the one she'd played on me in the kitchen, the absent husband, the lonely wife, the man married to his business. And Judge Reyes let it run for about 90 seconds before she leaned forward and asked Marlene directly whether she had signed her husband's name to a commercial loan. The room got so quiet I could hear the air handler kick on, and I knew that air handler. We'd installed it, Marlene said. She'd done it for household needs. Judge Reyes looked at the $41,000 figure on the screen and said that a watch from a downtown jeweler and a wire to a man at a parts supplier did not, in her experience, constitute household needs, and she said it the way you'd scrape something off your boot. Hazel testified. She didn't have to. She insisted. My 20-year-old stood up there in a borrowed blazer and told the judge that her father had worked himself half to death to put her through nursing school and had never once made her feel like the business mattered more than she did, and that her mother had hurt all of them, but especially Nora, who was already lost one mother and didn't deserve to feel like she was about to lose another family. I had to look at the floor. Corey backed her up, quiet and certain, and told the judge what he'd heard in the garage, the part about riding it out, the part about playing me. The ruling came fast. Judge Reyes granted me primary custody of Corey, who was nearly grown anyway, and had made his choice loud and clear. And the one I'd been holding my breath on. She kept Nora's guardianship with me. Full stop, citing the stability of the home and the documented financial misconduct of the other party. Marlene got supervised visitation, contingent on completing financial counseling and a course of therapy. On the money side, the stolen funds came back out of her share of the house. The forged loan became her debt and not the company's. And Pruitt Comfort Systems, the thing I'd built with one van and a bad back, stayed entirely mine, free and clear, the way it had been before she ever touched a ledger of it. Outside the courthouse, Deborah shook my hand and said I kept the only things that couldn't be replaced. Across the lot, Marlene was standing by her car, alone, no Trevor, no friends, scrolling through a phone that wasn't buzzing back at her anymore. For about 3 seconds, I felt sorry for her. Then I thought about a 12-year-old hoarding granola bars in a sock drawer, and the feeling passed, and I went and got my kids. That was a year ago, near enough. I'm standing in the kitchen of a different house on the other side of town, as I tell you this. Smaller yard, better light, flipping pancakes on a Saturday morning because Nora decided last spring that Saturdays are pancake days, and a promise sworn on banjo apparently extends to breakfast. The company didn't just survive the whole mess. It grew. Turns out when word gets around that a man fought clean and honest and didn't fold, the kind of clients you actually want come looking for you. We're up to 14 trucks now. Hazel made the dean's list and calls every Sunday to interrogate her brother about his grades. Corey got into a program for audio engineering and built me a little speaker for the shop out of parts I'd have thrown away. And Nora. Nora leaves her shoes in the middle of the hall like she owns the place. And she does. And she sleeps through the night now, and that mud of hers has finally gone gray around the muzzle, but still thumps his tail every time she walks in. There's one more thing, and I almost didn't put it in here, but it feels dishonest to leave it out. A couple months back, Banjo got into something he shouldn't have, and we ended up at the emergency vet on a Sunday night. Nora in tears, me in my work clothes, still smelling like coolant. The vet on call was a woman named Marissa. Calm hands, kind to the dog and kinder to the kid. And she stayed 40 minutes past the end of her shift explaining to a sobbing 12-year-old exactly why her dog was going to be fine. Turned out her boy Gabe is on the same rec league as half the kids in our neighborhood. Turned out she'd been divorced 2 years and had the same tired but not beaten look I see in the mirror most mornings. I didn't ask her anything that night, but a few weeks later I worked up the nerve to ask if she'd want to get a cup of coffee somewhere that didn't have a dog crying in the next room, and she laughed and said she'd been wondering how long it'd take me. We're taking it slow. The kids come first. I've said that to her plain, and she's said the same about hers, and I think that's half of why it works. Nora asked me, dead serious, whether I was happy, and when I said I was getting there, she nodded like a person twice her age and said, "Good, you're allowed." I think about Marlene sometimes, less than I used to. I don't hate her, which surprised me. What she did nearly leveled 4 people who never asked for any of it, and she did it with my own name in her hand and our kids' future in her account. But the strangest thing came out of all that wreckage. She spent 8 months building a secret life to escape the one she had, and in burning ours down, she handed me the match to build something truer. A quieter house, kids who know exactly where they stand, a dog gone gray on a sunlit floor, and a Saturday morning that smells like pancakes and starts with a girl who calls me family because she chose to, not because she had to. She meant to take everything. What she actually did was set me free. And I don't expect she'll ever understand that that was the only generous thing she ever gave me. The morning I found that second phone, I kept thinking about cause and effect the way I think about a failing system. Nothing breaks all at once, it breaks in a sequence, and if you trace it back honestly, you can usually find the first loose connection. Marlene didn't lose everything because she fell for Trevor. She lost everything because she decided, somewhere along the way, that the people who trusted her were just obstacles to manage. The forged loan, the drained children's account, the granola bar girl whose future she spent on hotel rooms. Those weren't accidents. They were choices stacked on choices, and choices have weight, and one day the whole stack comes down on whoever built it. I didn't have to ruin her. I just had to stop holding up her end. What I learned, sitting in that truck reading a bank statement 3 times with my hands shaking, is that being a decent man and being a smart man are not the same thing, and you need both, or the world will eat you. For years, I confused my decency with wisdom. I told myself that not snooping made me honorable, when really it just made me blind. The night I found out the truth, I didn't let my anger drive. I let it sit in the passenger seat while my head did the work. Lock the accounts first, gather the proof, call the accounts first, gather the proof, call the lawyer, protect the kids, then talk. If I'd led with my heart that night, she'd have emptied us before sunrise. Loving people doesn't mean refusing to think clearly about them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is keep your eyes open. And the hardest part, harder than the betrayal, harder than the court, was the staying power it took to do the right thing slowly. Anybody can blow up a house in one night. It takes something steadier to rebuild one pancake Saturday at a time, to keep showing up for a 12-year-old who's already learned that grown-ups leave, to swear an oath on a gray-muzzled dog, and then actually keep it through every quiet, ordinary morning after. That grind is where my real strength turned out to live. Not in the leaving, in the staying. For Hazel, for Corey, for Nora. If you take one thing from what happened to my family, let it be this. Guard your character even when no one's watching the books, because the books always tell the truth eventually. Sharpen your judgment so love never makes you stupid. And build the kind of quiet, stubborn endurance that outlasts the people who only know how to burn things down. Marlene meant to take my whole life. What she actually did was force me to find out I was stronger, clearer, and more honest than I'd ever needed to be. And that a family you choose, and choose again every morning, is the one nobody can ever sign away.